Hey, Alice.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Just so you know, we are live. We're just going to give everyone a few minutes to join in.
Okay. Puede, good morning.
Morning. I
How's it
think Carlos
going?
is also on the line. Good. How are you?
So far, so good. So far, so good. There's Carlos. Carlos, I like your giraffe.
Right? Trying to bring some colors into the background here.
I've been stuck in the same white room since, I don't know. I think everyone who's seen me talk now is just like, he never leaves. Never leaves. But
It kind of looks like you're in a closet.
That is the closet, but the door stays closed. If I was in New York, I'd be inside the closet, naturally. But anyways, thank you so much for taking the time out of what I know is a really busy day and a busy week and a busy time for you guys, especially with everything that's happening on transit. So again, thank you. I just have to say I have the utmost respect for anyone who's in a position of leadership in government, elected or unelected, to take part in these sort of things, because I know it's time, but it's also to be part of a forum like this and engage in this sort of dialogue is something that I think is a wonderful thing. And I really appreciate you, both of you, for taking the time to do this. It's great. So thank you. I also have to give a quick shout out to Verizon. Verizon has been helping us distribute masks throughout the county and talk to transit riders during this time. We've distributed nearly 300 masks across the county. They're also helping us put on this event. So thank you to Verizon. And if you're in the live chat, hanging around on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, say hi. Don't be a stranger. Don't be one of those people who just sits around and doesn't type anything. Say hi. The Translines team is there to gossip with you about all things transit and non-transit. So just the flow of today for the next hour, we're gonna let Alice and Carlos give us a little rundown of what's happening with transit right now, around 5 minutes to present or talk about what's happening on transit. We'll go through some quick questions for Translines, and then we'll get into the Riders Council questions. So Alice and Carlos, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alice Bravo, Director of Transportation and Public Works for Miami-Dade County. Very glad to be here today. And with me is Carlos. He can introduce himself.
Hey, good morning. Carlos Cruz-Casas. I'm Assistant Director of the Department of Transportation and Public Works. Among other things, I oversee the service planning and scheduling for the entire transit system.
Right. We're very glad to be here today, let you know some of the things that are going on. This is exciting times for the Department of Transportation and Public Works. We're both the Transit Department and the Public Works, and that's allowed us over the last 5 years to derive a lot of synergy between the different professionals in both divisions so that they could work together. Believe it or not, when I first got to the county and these were two separate departments, they were kind of operating in separate silos and not always working together to find solutions. So when I started there and the departments were merged, I'd sit everyone together and they'd argue about things, and I'm like, guys, what's best for mobility? That's what we're going to do, and forget about your department budget and your department budget. We're one department now, and we're going to do what's best for mobility in Miami-Dade County. So we've focused a lot on technology and what we could do to bring solutions quickly. A major initiative has been the smart signals. So we finally got that contract approved, $180 million. Someone who's a transit rider might say, well, what does that do for me? Well, smart signals, reduces congestion. So if you're on the bus, you're in less congestion. And it also brings transit signal priority. So that means that as your bus approaches a signal, the direction you're going in is going to get more green time so that the bus can get through. And so we're therefore facilitating the transit trip to be more convenient and more expeditious. Of course, we've been working on the Better Bus project with our Transit Alliance partners. We're very glad for that collaboration. I think it's been very beneficial. Early on in this position, I said that I wanted Dade County to be a car optional community. And certainly the Better Bus project takes us a long way to get closer to that goal. We're never going to stop. It's always got to be continuous improvement. But certainly the ability to have transit be a reliable solution for more people to get to further places and in less time, the Better Bus Project does help us accomplish that. So, you know, we focused on a lot of things for our transit riders, our app, the information we provide on our app, making that convenient, you know, the next bus information, making that more reliable. When I got here, just about all of our fleet was over 12 years old in terms of bus age. 12 years is usually the industry standard for retiring a bus. We had buses that were 19 years old. With the support of our mayor, our county commission, we've made a huge investment. And when we finish receiving our last batch of buses that we ordered, 3/4 of our bus fleet will in essence be brand new. We will have the newest bus fleet in the country. So if you want to encourage people to use transit, it's got to be reliable. Having these new buses is a huge investment in our belief of the public transit system. So that's going to make our service reliable. These new buses come with new equipment, better Wi-Fi modems. That means the information on our app becomes more reliable. So these are things we want to continue bringing, these types of solutions. We're launching our micro mobility project, which is basically circulator meets, you know, Uber or Lyft app, and it's a flexible route circulator. So we're hoping that will bring more people into the transit system. So again, we want to use technology. That's the fastest way to bring projects forward. At the same time, we have to work on the projects that take a long time. So we have the SMART plan, our 6 corridors, the South Corridor, which is pictured behind me, our transit station. So our goal for this corridor is for it to be a gold standard bus rapid transit. We, in May, were awarded $100 million from the federal government, from the FTA, for our Small Starts grant application. Believe it or not, that's the first time in over 20 years that Miami-Dade County receives an FTA corridor grant. So that's a huge accomplishment for Miami-Dade County. And we didn't waste any time. While we were pursuing the grant, we launched the procurement. So actually on the same commission meeting, we received the $100 million federal grant and we awarded the design build contract. So we hope to break ground on that here in the next couple of months and get that project up and running in about 2 years. So in terms of transit corridor projects, this is, you know, on the fastest pace imaginable, and especially here in Miami-Dade County, projects never move this fast. Of course, we're dealing with the COVID situation. We want to keep everybody safe, our passengers, our employees. And so we've worked on social distancing, facial masks, facial covering requirements, hand sanitizer everywhere, cleaning throughout the day of the vehicles of every kind. And thus far, we've been able to bring in 75 additional vehicles to supplement the vehicles we already had, so that as our ridership grew, we could maintain the social distancing requirements. We've installed plexiglass shields to protect our drivers, PPE, plethora of PPE has been distributed. And then a lot of, all those same rules apply within our facilities where the employees actually congregate. So with that, I don't know if you want to add anything, Carlos, but that's kind of the quick overview of DTPW.
No, I think that was on point. You know, the one thing I'll add is, you know, similar to many agencies around the nation and the world, you know, we cut transit severely at the beginning of the pandemic. Unlike them, we have restored most of these routes to 100% and added supplemental services that you mentioned, right? Not only, you know, additional buses that we brought in, but we repurposed our buses from nighttime to daytime, from the day to reallocate them to have over 100 new buses running and supplemental services that some routes are now even on a frequency of every 5 minutes, right? So some of these things that we haven't seen in other places, I have, in my quick dial, many agencies across the nation, and we communicate often. We see the amount of efforts being done here to make sure that, in these tough times, we still have transit available for people that need it.
No, cool. Thank you both. I think it's really important to start from the place where you both started from, because I think the foundation of any sort of constructive dialogue is a lot of people knowing the things that you guys are dealing with and the things that you guys are working on. So thank you both for sharing everything that's going on with transit right now. Let's move on to some quick questions from Transit Lines, really quick, 30 seconds, and then we'll go into the Riders Council questions. So first question, when and where is the next dedicated bus lane in Miami-Dade County?
Well, we're enthusiastically supporting an endeavor to bring dedicated bus lanes on Flagler Street. This is a study that actually FDOT has taken the initiative on. We're hoping that very shortly they bring that to the Transportation Planning Organization for approval of their locally preferred alternative. So certainly this is a corridor with very, very high transit utilization. And this is, I think, a great place to start. So, we did our demonstration project downtown to show this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like. But Flagler Street, I think, is very important in terms of the place where it's really, really needed.
So that's the where. What is the when?
So I think if they're able to receive their locally preferred alternative approval at the TPO, they could have this implemented within 4 years, right, Carlos? Yeah. And once we do it here, this kind of answers the question. I mean, these are major reconfigurations of these arterials. This is where you want to have these dedicated bus lanes. So it requires these levels of approval at a policy level from our elected officials, and showing that this works on a place like Flagler Street, I think answers all the questions, and then it becomes much easier on the other arterials that, yes, policymakers, it's worth giving a vehicular lane and turning it over to transit.
Right. Okay. Next question. With ridership returning and bus service boosted, why is Metrorail less frequent and closing early for now?
Well, as we look at all of our resources, we're looking at the ridership. So the bus ridership numbers have increased more than the Metrorail. We're keeping a close eye on it, and basically we're trying to keep that social distancing buffer. We have taken this time to make all kinds of infrastructure improvements on the Metrorail, a lot of heavy duty maintenance. We brought in contractors for that. So again, this is something we can look at restoring whatever we had before. Businesses are reopening. As we return to normal, this will return to normal too.
Yeah. Last rapid fire question. When can riders expect the Better Bus Network to be implemented, give or take?
Well, I think an important observation is that, yes, we reduced bus service when the ridership dropped dramatically. But as we restored the bus service, we basically followed the blueprint of the Better Bus Network in terms of where we put the frequency back. So to a great extent, like Carlos mentioned, we have some routes where we actually have a 5-minute frequency. So I think we're on that path already in a substantial way. And
would riders maybe expect the full network sometime in 2021?
Well, I think so. We're just one commission vote away from that, right? That's all.
You know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep the ball rolling. Okay, on to the Riders Council. So for those of you who don't know the Riders Council is a new thing we're doing at Transit Lines, where we've convened riders from all across the county, almost every commission district, riders who rely on transit and have been in Miami for a while relying on transit. So we've put together some questions from them. They range all over the place, from the coronavirus response down to the recovery plan. And we're going to try to do around 3 minutes per question so that we can get through all of them and maybe with a little bit of follow-up. So I'll just go ahead and go straight into the first question. The first question is from David on the coronavirus response. And I hope you can hear all the questions properly. If you have trouble, let me know and I'll summarize the question at the end. So let's start with David.
My name is David Peary, and I've been left behind by a full bus on numerous occasions, and I depend on transit to get to work every day. It's becoming incredibly challenging for me to rely on the bus system because I can never know for sure when I'll be able to get a bus. And this will only get worse as more and more riders return to transit. So my question is, what is your plan to immediately reduce the number of riders being left behind and to improve our ability to plan our trips with more certainty? Thank you.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, we've brought in, I think actually close to 80 vehicles to supplement our peak vehicle requirement, which is in the 550 range. So that's a substantial investment in trying to make sure we don't have passengers left behind. As we return to normal, we're basically beyond this point going to have to relax the social distancing requirements because we're getting back to normal. It makes no sense to try to find more and more buses to bring in. So we're in the process of preparing that plan for approval, and that way we can, at least start using the seats and maybe still not have people standing, but not relying on the every other seat policy.
Carlos, did you want to add something?
No, that's a good point, right? So imagine with a quarter of the capacity of the buses that we allow today, that's what we allow, 25% of the capacity of the bus. We had, thinking about this way, we had to provide transit service for 4 times the ridership that we had before with the same resources, right? That is unheard of, right? So we're trying to introduce new services in, and we've done that through the entire kind of situation. Moving forward, the next lineup, what's going to be doing now in November is formalizing some of these supplemental services into a schedule, right? So you're going to have a more consistent headway through the peak time, basically. All this that sometimes comes every 5 minutes, 10, 15, 5, 10, 5, 10, is going to be more consistent throughout the peak time and throughout the day. I think that's going to help in order to the reliability of the system. And on top of that, we are exploring, and this is something that we see in all the cities too, exploring with incentives to help people that have flexibility in the travel pattern not to take a seat during the peak time, right? This is something that is important, right? We have limited capacity, we have resources to provide that. If we can just kind of take a seat away or a person away and provide facility for someone in, that is a benefit. So we have some incentives, and we're going to continue to figure out what's the right balance between the supply and demand in this case.
What is your external marker measurement or metric to relax social distancing on transit? Like, what are you looking at when you're making that sort of decision? Is there a particular, is it the positivity rate? Is it like, well, how does that get made, basically?
So as it is, the requirement was to either have a 6-foot separation or a mask, but because people were on a bus, it was indoors, you're confined. We tried to space people out. Nobody felt comfortable looking at a crowded bus. And so that's how we got into the social distancing policy. And now that we're going to phase 3 and basically everything is being opened up, that's what's triggering us to relax it.
Okay, cool. Oh, thank you both. Okay, moving on to the next question. This is Nick, who's going to talk a bit about pandemic rider safety.
Hi there, my name is Nick Arce, and I'm a student at Miami-Dade College, Wolfson campus. With the reopening of public schools and colleges for in-person learning, students are not commuting on public transit to fulfill mandatory attendance requirements. Traveling on public transportation and sharing a commute with fellow riders can be risky if extensive precautions aren't taken. Agencies around the country are experimenting with better air purification technologies, strategies for more mask compliance, and even real-time capacity updates for riders. What additional measures will the department employ moving forward to ensure the safety of Miami student population that has recently returned to transit? Thank you.
Well, I think the most important things we've done for the COVID, we installed hand sanitizer dispensers everywhere, buses, Metro Mover, Metro Rail. We provided the enforcement for the facial coverings. We increased the sanitizing of the vehicles multiple times during the day. So I think the most important thing is that we just keep doing those basic things. If people keep their facial coverings on, then we're winning half the battle, So as this pandemic started, we worked to see what other jurisdictions were doing. And basically, we were going to do everything everybody was doing, plus more, whatever else we could think of. So I think I think it's worked so far, and we're just going to continue that into the future.
Yeah. And on the other side, Miami-Dade County is huge, right? It's bigger in some states. One of the things that we're doing is we have a survey out, a daily survey, so people can fill out where they feel that their, the peer, the riders are not using the mask or not keeping social distancing. So we can then basically focus our enforcement and our kind of communication to those areas, right? So this is something that we launched just recently, and hopefully we can continue to do so to make sure that we use our resources better and target those areas where we are not seeing the adherence.
Mm-hmm. So given that we may have a possibility of social distancing guidelines being relaxed, one thing that Nick mentioned is real-time crowding levels on the buses for riders. Is that a possibility, and is that planned for?
So relaxing the social distancing?
I mean, given that might be a possibility as we enter phase 3, is that social distancing on the capacities might be increased on buses. A lot of agencies have been doing real-time crowding information. So if you're looking at a trip on Google Maps, you can see, okay, find this bus is, what is the crowding level? Is there enough space? Some agencies have gone to the level of detail where you can see specific train cars that have less people, so you can plan to stand at the right place. Does Miami-Dade Transit have the infrastructure and the technology to do something like that?
So we've been doing that for the buses internally. We have our passenger counters activated, and the supervisors are monitoring that. So we can see, so we can tell the bus operator, hey, you're filling up. We know the next stop has a lot of people. Bypass that stop. We're sending a supplemental bus behind you. So that's something we could look into, making that information available online. I'd have to look into and see if we have the same thing for the Metro Rail. Given that we have 4-car trains, I think it's easier to spot which cars are full or not. Maybe where in other cities it's a 6-car and 8-car train, it might be more difficult.
Right.
But we'll look into that.
Let's move on to Laurie, I think safety has been sort of in the news also with the Metro Mover incidents, and Laurie just has a question about safety for women in particular on transit.
Over the past several years while riding transit, I have experienced a few incidents whereby my safety as a female rider was threatened. 2 of them have involved bus operators, and I have reported it to the department each time. It has been 6 years since the first incident, and I don't feel any safer today than I did then. As one of the few women leading a transportation department nationwide, what steps have you taken to make women safer on transit? And what is the protocol in place if a transit employee is found to engage in unsafe behavior towards a rider? Thank you.
Well, I think first things first, the number one thing with regard to employees and bus operators is zero tolerance. I think the most important thing for our patrons is to feel safe. And to know that they are our top priority. I've had zero tolerance policies for everything from using your cell phone while operating the bus, zero tolerance for bypassing a passenger waiting at a stop. So certainly any inappropriate behavior towards a passenger is not acceptable and will not be tolerated. And in terms of safety and let's say the recent Metro Mover incidents, basically we reviewed the system from top to bottom. We've had the cameras inside the vehicles now connected directly to the police department. We've augmented the amount of security, roving riders, roving security guards at stations, working with county and city police to have a greater presence. Basically, we want it to be to the point where no one would even dare think of doing anything like that on the Metro Mover again. It's completely unacceptable. We're shocked, we're horrified, and we want to make sure this never happens again.
And what steps can the department also take in terms of buses? Because I know that that's an even more challenging problem because it's such a distributed system. But some things around, for example, lighting at bus shelters, and also what are the security and surveillance protocols on buses as well, just so people have an idea of what those sort of systems are like.
Well, I think something that maybe we need to increase our awareness of is in our app. Our new app, Go Miami-Dade, was basically the integration of 3 different apps we had before. We had the app with the rider information, we had the payment app, and then we had like a say something, the Transit Watch app. So we've merged those 3. So if you're in a vehicle, the app provides you like a discrete ability to report something that's going on, because we will deploy security immediately to any situation that is reported to us. So there are people monitoring that information coming in from the app in live and are able to take action.
Cool. Okay, moving on. Aaron has a question. We're moving on to some of the major corridors now. Aaron has a question about the Northeast Corridor stations.
Where transit stations are located determines a lot of whether the transit will succeed or fail. Right now, along the Northeast Corridor, there's a debate among 2 proposed locations. One next to Wynwood, Edgewater, and Midtown, and the other next to the Design District. 2 locations that are too close together to have a location each. Data compiled by some of the top urban planning firms in Miami overwhelmingly conclude that the station at 27th Street next to Wynwood would serve the most residents, visitors, and commuters of any proposed station along the entire corridor. If the data is clear, why are we still debating where the right decision for a train station is going to be?
I just want to make sure that audio came through okay on that one. Okay, cool. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I first heard about the Northeast Corridor when I was like in elementary school. Okay. So this has been discussed for a long time. Forever and ever, there was a dot, and that dot was somewhere around 36th Street or the Julia Tuttle, I-195. And when that dot started appearing on a map, there was nothing in that area. Nothing compared to what we see today with Midtown, Design District, Wynwood. So certainly that area has exploded, and there's enough development and density to support 2 stations. We've worked closely with Brightline on operational analysis. That's what station spacing comes down to. And they feel confident that 2 stations can be accommodated. One we're calling Wynwood around 26th Street, and another one in the Design District, 39th Street. So I know that there was a memo issued kind of prioritizing stations, but that was not meant to preclude stations.
So with the 2 stations that close together, I mean, under commuter rail, my math is not very good, but that might be like a 5-minute journey between the 2 stations. Correct. On a train. Does that impede the usability of the system overall? Because you're essentially replacing some level of walking, bus, biking trip with putting 2 stations next to each other on such a heavy rail service.
Well, I think the way we look at it at the end of the day is that this is a commuter rail, and most commutes are usually to the central business district, i.e. the downtown Miami. So, when you look at the density and the people that are going to be living in those areas, I think the transit-oriented development that's planned in the design district is substantial. I'm certainly not going to walk from 26th Street to downtown Miami. So that part of Biscayne Boulevard is congested, I-95 is congested. We want to keep all those people out of cars. We want them to have a convenient transit option to get to downtown. So that's okay. What we get with those 2 stations.
Okay, thank you. And I wish I could just keep going with follow-ups, but There's so many good questions. So we're just gonna keep going, and I appreciate all of your answers so far. We have David talking about another corridor, transit-oriented development in South Dade.
Hi, Alice. It's David Acosta from the Writers Council. I wanted to ask what steps Miami-Dade County was doing to encourage economic development all along the South Dade BRT. It's a great project, and I'm really excited to see what is being done to really encourage economic development and transit-oriented projects.
I think the most critical step was taken a few years before the approval of the South Corridor. Commissioner Bobo, chairman of the Transportation Committee, led the effort to increase the density around the corridors. So that's basically how you spur the right type of transit-oriented development. Certainly, wherever we have properties in terms of park and rides, we're going to make those available for conversions to transit-oriented development, just like we've been doing on the Metro Rail. And I have to say that as a transit community, when the Metro Rail was built, there were these stations with these huge parking lots and all this land set up for transit-oriented development. But we, as a community, we were a little kid then. We didn't understand the value of this. Now, because of all the different factors, congestion, density, real estate values, suddenly we're seeing this huge interest in transit-oriented development, particularly over the last 5 years. So we've been contacted by all kinds of developers that are planning things around the South Corridor. So it's in the works. There are projects in the pipeline.
Are the BRT stations essentially considered on par to Metro Rail sort of in the code? What I mean by that, like little things like, are developers forced to build parking near a BRT station, whereas they might get exemptions under Metro Rail? Like, is there any practical difference for them?
Yeah, these station sites have the urban center designations in the code where those flexibilities are offered.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Moving on to Tyler and another corridor that gets a fair bit of attention, the east-west corridor.
Many people on the west side of the county are car dependent because there aren't many east-west transit options. The Flagler Street Bus Rapid Transit Project won't start construction until 2025, and the 836 Dolphin Express bus was discontinued not long after it began service. What can your department do in the next 2 years to connect more people from West Dade to the jobs and opportunities in the city to the east?
Right. Well, we're certainly very interested in restoring our Dolphin Park and Ride Express service. That was a huge project for us, and basically at the time we discontinued the route, there were, I think, like 2 riders. So it didn't make any sense to keep that going during the pandemic. But certainly we want to restore routes like that. And we acquired a huge property next to that Dolphin Park and Ride, and we've put out an RFP for transit-oriented development. So we plan to make that a major anchor for the east-west corridor, similar to what the Dadeland area has been for the Metro Rail. And we're also, for the east-west corridor, we're taking that to the TPO in a couple of weeks for a locally preferred alternative to have true bus rapid transit and stations along the 836 highway. And we want to extend this out to the Tamiami Park and Ride that's being built on 8th Street and 147th. And we hope to convince FDOT of having some dedicated bus lanes on 8th Street between 147th and 137th, and maybe a little flyover ramp for buses. So you could get from that Tamiami Park ride straight onto the highway and bypassing the congestion on your bus. So I think that'll provide a very strong network for the areas out west.
And of the projects that you mentioned, what might be accomplished in 2 years, or what might be able to be expedited to be accomplished in 2 years? I think only because we've seen so many cities across the country go from like deploying dedicated bus lanes within the span of sometimes even as short as 1.5 to 2 years. Like, is that a possibility in Miami? And the Flagler Street as an example, with the 2025 timeline just for construction, what's keeping our community from going faster on these sort of projects that we've been talking about for decades?
Well, I think the fact that we're having this conversation is a benefit. I think there's policymakers that have to vote on these things, And when they're thinking, I'm gonna take a lane away from cars and turn it into a bus lane, I'm sure they imagine that 100,000 angry people are gonna call them and scream about, what do you mean I'm losing a vehicular lane? So I think they need to hear from the public that there is wide-reaching support for this as a concept.
Right. No, and I'll echo you on that. To any commissioner officers who might be listening, not having something as fast and easy as a dedicated bus lane has really hampered our community, and politics shouldn't get in the way of that sort of decision making when it comes to building out these corridors. Vincent has a question about integrating the city trolleys.
When you were still with the City of Miami, you helped design and implement the city's free trolley routes. The system now has 13 routes, but 77% of the ridership is concentrated on just 5 routes. As taxpayers, we are all paying for duplicative transit services that don't work together. Why has your department failed at integrating the trolley system that you helped create into the overall county transit system that you currently lead?
So this is a tough one that I know has been a sticking point for me for a while. So go ahead, Alice.
Obviously, at the end of the day, there are things we control and there are things we don't control. And in terms of the Better Bus Project, certainly that was the objective, to integrate and leverage everybody's resources to be efficient and effective. So that requires the city relinquishing control over something that they pay for. So that's on the table and we're working on it.
Yeah, I guess as riders, like, we're looking at these two systems of government and we're thinking about entities trying to maintain control over their own systems, and we don't necessarily seem to have the structure for that sort of collaboration to take place. Because even with the Better Bus Project, like, we've tried to bring the two systems together, but it's been incredibly difficult, and now even more so because politics tends to get in the way of that. Are there any sort of structural changes that we can make to the way that as a community we think and we operate these systems that might solve this permanently?
Well, I think, where everyone is supposed to come together is at the TPO. Certainly the municipalities are funding these routes with their CITT dollars. So like everything in life, there's levers and there's how things are controlled. So that's where, you could implement policies that provide a more integrated structure.
Cool. Okay. Moving on to Merline about real-time information at bus stops.
Hello, my name is Merline Leons. I represent District 9 in Miami-Dade County. With most bus routes not being very frequent, riders constantly have to check their phones to know when the next bus is coming. Some major stations have real-time displays, but other cities have shelters with displays that show when the next bus is coming. Does the department have any plans to implement real-time arrival information at more bus stops?
This is actually something we've been exploring, and so I'll turn it over to Carlos.
Oh, excellent, thank you. So that's right? So we have been able to, over the last year, added electronic signs with estimated time of arrival and metro rail stations and bus terminals, right? These signs are expensive, and most importantly are the required power connection, right? In the coming months, we're even going to be launching a pilot project with a digital bulletin board that can also be used to provide transit information. We have explored and had conversation with cities like Pittsburgh and Kansas City and San Francisco and other places where they have lightweight solar powered signs, but have not yet been proven effective, right? Due to the size of the battery that they have. We're going to continue to explore, and we're right now identifying a few kind of small form factor solar battery operated signs that we are going to be trying out, and hopefully in 2021 we're going to see some of those kind of put in place. As for transit information, I'm thrilled to say that we have made our real-time information for buses available in real time to any third-party application that want to see it. So even not only the Go Miami-Dade app, but Google Maps, Apple Maps, and even Transit app, can have this information. That means that riders can use any application of choice to bring that information to their to knowledge. Not only that, we're already introducing and tapping into our partners in the cities to make sure that their information is also presented. We're right now in soon going to be rolling out Coral Gables as our first kind of beta testing to introduce and merge GTFS and GTFS in real time to make sure that when you look for information in one map in the third party or Go Miami-Dade app, you see all that in the same place. And on top of that, as we continue to figure out how to bring all the information effectively to one place, we have smartphone applications. We're going to continue to explore on the ETA signs, but we also understand that sometimes people don't have or don't want to use the applications or don't have a smartphone, right? So we're going to be also this fall later this year, let's say, launch the text to ETA, which is another component to make sure that real-time information is accessible by all. Right, there's a lot to unpack here. The last thing I would say is, yes, we have over 7,500 bus stops around Miami-Dade County, of which only about 2,600 are located within unincorporated areas. We are launching, or we're basically adding 360 new shelters in UMSA. In our contract, we definitely ask for this type of technology. However, since it's not fully scalable, you're not going to be able to see that as a proposal from companies out there. But the one thing I'll say is we're not going to stop. We understand, again, the technology is there. We just need to figure out what's the best way for us to launch it. And we're going to need trying out some of these different forms to make sure that it's sustainable and fully scalable. The last thing we want to do is have a sign in 2-3 stops and not being able to expand it throughout Miami-Dade County.
Yeah, no, that reminds me of the AC bus shelter, which let's not talk about. Let's go on to question 9 from China, which is about some of the investments the department's making right now.
Hi, my name is China Carr, and I'm on the Transit Alliance Writers Committee. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer our questions today. Something I really wanted to ask is, with the current state of transit and all the issues we're experiencing as riders today, why is the department continuing to invest in less cost-effective projects like on-demand transit and outreach for autonomous vehicles, instead of investing in solutions to improve the system that is currently struggling with the effects of the pandemic?
Oh, Alice, you might be muted, but I don't know which one of you would like to take the question.
When we talk about on-demand transit, that's actually a key to having a more effective transit system, I think. So right now, something as Carlos and I have been working on for the last 3 years is that we have bus routes in places where it doesn't make sense, right? You have low density, limited number of riders, et cetera. So why not reallocate those resources to the high frequency corridors? And there's still people out there that need transit. So if the on-demand transit proves to be a lower cost option and we can still provide access for those people, then it's a benefit to everybody. So why do we experiment with these other things? Because we need to find the best solutions to have a comprehensive system that works for everyone. And as new opportunities are on the table, we're going to explore them to see if it's something that helps us.
So I know that you guys haven't had a at-scale on-demand transit solution yet. It's mainly been pilots, but could you tell us a bit about some of the cost effectiveness of how those systems have performed versus, let's say, 60-minute bus routes or 30-minute bus routes? Like, how has it gone so far with the information that you have?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you have to start that each bus, now we're buying CNG buses. A bus might cost, $800,000. It takes 2 years to produce. So that has to go into the equation, not just the hourly or the trip cost.
Right.
And let me just
go ahead.
Let me just make note of that as we haven't started on the on-demand service, right? We're going to be launching later this fall our first deployment of this pilot, right? And when we talked about cost effectiveness and we talked about ridership, I often consider that we're comparing mangoes and oranges, right? There's not necessarily the same thing. And the pandemic definitely has shown us that ridership is not necessarily the only metric that we should be using to justify transit, right? And I think what Alice is mentioning, and I think what we see throughout the nation is there have been some examples about on-demand transit service, again, not necessarily being applied to the best use case, but some that had shown that it has its time and space to do. right? The fact that with one vehicle, we can now basically multiply the number of bus stops, right? And we create a greater accessibility. While the numbers of a passengers per vehicle hour might be similar to a low productivity bus route, which by the way, we have many low productivity bus routes, but we need those in order to provide access to the high frequency bus routes, right? You need that secret sauce, that equation that can balance, right? So what I would say is, let's not put the cart in front of the horse. I think we have a great opportunity ahead of us. We're going to be launching later this month this type of program. We need to understand what are the benefits. I think, like Alice says, it's mentioned about connectivity, accessibility, and really bring back trust into transit. I think there's a lot of these things that come in play, right? So I'm really excited about this particular program as it can help us understand where and we need to put on-demand transit service throughout Miami-Dade County. That again is such a vast area with different needs across the entire county. There is a time and space for us to do so. And in terms of AV, right? So, autonomous vehicle technology is here, right? It is happening, right? And it's not going to take long that this technology can help us save lives also on the transit side. We do have a grant that is dedicated for us to understand the public perception and basically to get that two-way communication into the technology and how that can be applied to transit and other mobility solutions. I think that is beneficial. This is the first time, again, that I'm seeing that we are shifting the script and we're making sure that we start for community outreach. We start with planning with and for the community, right? They're going to be hiring community liaisons to make sure we have that two-way communication. I think this is critical for us to start there, and let's see where it goes, right? So I think there's a long road ahead of us. There's a technology that is available today. It can be saving lives, and if that is the case, we're going to continue to pursue those.
Right. I think just one last follow-up question to that, and then we have four more. And thank you for sticking around. I know this is quite a bit and we're all over the place. You mentioned for the outreach for autonomous vehicles, programs like community liaisons and sort of this two-way communications. Does the transit department have that same process for transit, and what does it look like?
Well, in terms of autonomous vehicles, we've been approached by different companies, different entities, different organizations. And basically, this is a technology that we think has a lot of potential, not only in terms of reducing congestion, but improving safety, et cetera. So as they've approached us, we've worked with them in terms of what they were needed. And most of them are like self-sufficient. For example, Ford with the autonomous vehicles came in here and they're mapping the streets. They have their own maintenance hub. They basically only asked us for a little bit of guidance. Hey, who do we talk to for this? Where do we go for that? So certainly anyone on the transit side, we're open to that as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point, As. And one of the things that I challenge the team is, right, let's think about this process about community liaisons bigger than just autonomous vehicles. Ultimately, is a way for us to transform how we do transportation planning. Yes, we're using it as a base for new technologies coming in, but this can very well be applicable to all other transit solutions, right? And I think, we need more, right? We need more. I think, we have enjoyed of the last couple of years and the ups and downs working with, entities like you guys, the Riders Alliance, some of the others. We need more, right? Even a department, we can have more staff dedicated to all this, but we're never going to be enough. And I think that's why we definitely are here today. This is a good indicating factor, the fact that there's interest from the department, interest from the community, interest from entities like the Transit Alliance to make sure that we establish a strong two-way communication moving forward.
Right. Cool. Lauren has a question on safer streets.
Hello, Ms. Bravo. My name is Lauren Fernandez. Our metropolitan area has been deemed one of the most dangerous places for residents to walk and bike in the entire country. We have adopted Vision Zero in principle, which is a county-wide commitment to eliminate traffic fatalities, especially for pedestrians and cyclists. But we've yet to see the matching comprehensive plan or investment. As the Director of Public Works, how have you reformed your department to focus on cyclist and pedestrian safety instead of road expansion and maintenance? Some follow-up questions I would like answered are how many miles of bike lanes will be completed next year? How many pedestrian intersection improvements will be completed by next year? Thank you for your time.
Well, I think something she mentioned is let's say the secret sauce for making this happen. It's a cultural shift with the designers and the project managers in charge of the public works projects, as well as the people that review the plans from municipalities and the plans from developers. So we've had internal workshops, internal trainings, basically to make sure that when anybody looks at anything in terms of a design, they're thinking Vision Zero. So yes, there are standalone safety projects and standalone safety intersection improvements that our traffic engineering group moves forward. But you know, in essence, every project we look for providing dedicated bicycle lanes, or how is the intersection being treated. So it's something that's just being woven into our day-to-day fabric.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? And the other thing is the presence of standards and the engineering judgment that we applied to it. We recently also kind of brought together a group of engineers, planners, and attorneys, and our goal in this Complete Streets Collaborative is to bring some of these situations forward and say how we can best identify new approaches towards addressing the situation where we don't have enough right away, when we have a conflict between operational and not operational needs, right? So there's a lot of that, you know. And while we definitely understand the Vision Zero is the overarching right approach, and we want to make sure that every single project that we do is turning towards that, you know, we have also identified projects for the next couple of years to introduce Vision Zero projects. And to us, it's all the same: Vision Zero, safety, complete streets. We have in different buckets to make sure that we have a plan forward to help us fund some of this project.
Does the department have an internal metric for when? Because most cities, when they have this sort of Vision Zero commitment, one, it has a lot more investment and a much more comprehensive sort of suite of activities. Does the department have a target date for Vision Zero, which a lot of cities, you know, as hard as it is to get to that target, like set a target of like 2030, 2040, 2050. Does the department have that sort of target, and how is it working backwards from that date?
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, so you've probably seen the Vision Zero plan from the TPO, right? The Transportation Planning Organization. This is something that our department worked very closely with them to develop that. You know, I know we have that idea, you know, when is it, 2030, 2040, 2050? You know, we said, let's just bring it as soon as possible. We need to make sure that we put pressure on not only on us, but in all the other agencies around. We have 34 municipalities. We have state agencies to make sure that we are walking towards a common goal. So as far as I know, I think we're targeting 2030. It's not long before that date arrives here. We already kind of identifying projects for Vision Zero to introduce improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists. And let's make note of that, right? So our initial target for Vision Zero projects and complete streets are focusing on the areas with high crash locations where a vehicle and a non-vehicle happens, right? So we understand that we still have car-on-car kind of crashes. Those are basically not an initial priority for us. You know, like Alice says, we already started with, you know, workshops internally to make sure that it is embedded in everyone's mind, the fact that everything we do, from a placement of a bus stop, from a placement of a, you know, a signal, or even a crosswalk, everything we do needs to be thinking in mind the fact that we are in a path to eliminate traffic fatalities on our roads.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to try and get through these last three questions. We have Prem about the merger between Transportation and Public Works, which Alice, you touched on in the beginning of the meeting.
My name is Premli Barbosa. I represent District 4 on the Riders Council. My question is, in what ways have transit riders benefited from the merger of Transportation and Public Works into one department? Public Works still seems to focus on expanding roads and increasing car dependency, instead of supporting mass transit with dedicated bus lanes and pedestrian or cycling infrastructure? Why?
So Alice, I know you talked about the signals at the top of the meeting, but maybe beyond those, what should we be thinking about when it comes to this question?
You know, I think you cannot look at Dade County and say that Public Works is increasing dependency on vehicles. Miami-Dade County was planned and zoned as a huge suburban area. And that is why people are dependent on vehicles. So changing that comes down to expansion of transit. It comes down to land use. You know, for many years, I heard transit advocates say, oh, well, let's force people to use transit by not widening roads, et cetera. And this is a democracy, and you can't force people to do anything. And that's why you see so many people sitting in their cars in congested roads for hours and hours. So, you know, our responsibility is mobility for everyone. And our responsibility is to give people very good transit options so that they want to get out of their cars.
Right.
That being said, the collaboration between and integration between transit and public works led to transit signal priority on the South Dade Transitway before BRT, where we reduced travel time by 25%. So improving traffic operations at a signal improves the time in which a bus gets through that intersection. So everything goes hand in hand. It's a transportation network. That's why the two departments together has been a good fit. We've done a lot of things that wouldn't have happened because one department was thinking one way and the other department was thinking the other way, and nobody was forcing them to think together of what's best for mobility. And that's where we are.
And that's a question I would love to get into. Hopefully we'll do this again someday, but at another time, of how much car use needs to be disincentivized in order to push people to transit. And I think it's a great debate to have at a later time. But I want to make sure I leave you guys on time. So these last two questions, one is from Stacy.
Hi, Ms. Bravo. Hope you're doing well. Our transportation decisions seem to be made by an alphabet soup of government agencies that don't make any sense to transit riders and taxpayers. It's big government bureaucracy and political meddling at its worst, and has resulted in decades of failure to expand mass transit. Most cities have consolidated planning, funding, and operations within a transportation authority. Do you support the creation of an independent Miami-Dade Transportation Authority? Why or why not? Thank you.
Well, I think you can look at a lot of different places and reach a lot of different conclusions. I don't know that there's one right answer. You could look and say, well, you know, we created an expressway authority and that hasn't been smooth sailing. And there's been some politics in that. So I think the most important thing is how we work together. We have a TPO, we have a transportation planning organization. That's where all the planning is integrated. I think, you know, in the alphabet soup, there's what happens in municipalities, there's what's happening at the county, the state. It's impossible to say that I'm gonna bring in every element because all planning and zoning for the county, in essence, contributes to the transportation issues. So there's nowhere where you can draw a clean line. And then if you did all that, there's no guarantee that it's going to be smooth sailing. And look at MDX. So that's all I can tell you. What I can tell you is that we work collaboratively with the DOT, with the planning and zoning. We work at the state level, the federal level. A lot of it is about relationships. I speak to the head of the FTA on my cell phone. We text each other at night. You know, did that help us get $100 million for the South Corridor? Yes, probably. We also got $100 million from the state. Why? Because I'm on first name basis. I used to work with the head people at the DOT. You know, so at the end of the day, we have a good process in place. We've built all kinds of infrastructure, both roadway and transit. So I don't think that we can say, oh, because we don't have this structure or that structure, things are impeded, because we have lots and lots of good examples of things that we can show. And then there are examples of authorities that haven't worked out. So I think we build on what we have and we keep going.
Cool. Last question from Roger.
Hello, Director Bravo. My name is Roger Williams, a member of the Writers' Council. I'm also a constituent of District 1, which is currently under Barbara Jordan. My question is, what is MDT's bounce back strategy? How are you going to get riders back on our buses, back on our trains once COVID-19 has subsided? Thank you.
Well, I think we have been trying to get the word out of everything that we're doing in terms of cleaning, hand sanitizers, etc. We launched a media campaign to get that word out. We've seen people very cooperative with regard to wearing the facial coverings. So I think it's like a lot of things, there's also the word of mouth marketing. So forums like this, anywhere and everywhere we get a chance, we want to tell people the good things we're doing and why our system is safe for people to come back.
Cool. So I know we're at the end, so I want to leave you guys on time. And I just want to say, again, like the same way that I started this meeting, first of all, I think our country is in dire need of constructive dialogue. So I appreciate you guys coming and spending time with us. Again, I have the utmost respect for people who take the time to participate in these sort of forums and things. I hope you would agree to do it again someday, because I think that, like Carlos said, these sort of two-way communications in person, in a real town hall. But anyway, just to wrap up, again, thank you so much. I want to leave you guys on time. If anyone out there wants to support Transit Alliance, it starts at $2 a month, transitalliance.miami/join. And once again, thank you so much, Alice and Carlos. Any last words before we disconnect?
Thank you. As over the years, we've gotten to know each other. I'll tell you, there's all kinds of things when I took this job that I had no idea would work out so well and be beneficial, and part of it is luck. And I think part of it is also the maturing of our community, that are groups that come together to bring certain interests to the forefront. Like we're fortunate to have the Underline. How wonderful is the Underline, a community grass roots group that's bringing attention to the Metro Rail and attracting people to the Metro Rail. And you've helped us to that end with regard to all transit issues and particularly the bus issues. So we welcome these forums and these opportunities to hear firsthand from our patrons what we can do better.
No, again, and Carlos, I want to have a last word as well, but it's been a two-way learning process. I think that I've learned so much about the constrictions and restrictions the department has to deal with. And of course, as advocates, and even within this presentation, there's so many things that we're pushing for. There's so many things that we want to see. And again, it's all because we work towards the same goal of improving transit. So it's been a learning experience for me in terms of what you as a department deal with, what you as individuals deal with, and how much work you guys put into it. I think the thing I've learned the most is like how much you guys work, period, which is a lot. And on a personal level, again, I have a lot of respect for that. And again, forums like these where we can have these sort of dialogues and step by step sort of align ourselves to what we can work on together and move forward. And I think the Better Bus Project is a wonderful example of that. And I hope there's more to come from our community. So Carlos, any last words?
I think you stole that from me. I think, we're working towards a common goal, and that's what makes the difference, right? And this is a perfect example, probably one of the unique in the nation on how the department and the community at large is working together, right? And the Better Bus Project is a perfect, kind of combination to that process, but it's not going to be the end. There's a lot more to do, right? We want to continue with a great transit service throughout Miami-Dade County. We want to continue with better walking spaces and bicycle, the enjoyment of our community. This is a great place to be on outdoors, right? So there's a lot more to do together, and I'm very enthusiastic about the road ahead of us and what we're going to be able to accomplish, right? And I do basically urge everyone out there to either reach out to you guys or to us to see how we can continue to develop this two-way communication so we can work together towards a common goal.
Cool. All right. Thank you both again. Thank you for everyone who is tuning in. I'm looking forward to seeing what happened in the live chat. But thanks again, guys. And thank you both again. Take care.